neighborhood beautification. That's very important to Detroit. It's very important to block clubs, organizations, and people who live in the community. We got started with 2 lots and a vision of a treehouse center. Because if we can take these blighted lots, Detroit give us grants to be able to do something with them that the community wants, it's a plus because we're bringing our neighborhoods back to where we want them to be, where they should be, all because I live in Detroit.
All right, I'd like to welcome to this edition of In the Conference Room with Mark S. Lee. I hope you're having a wonderful day and having a wonderful week, all that good stuff. Hey, by the way, as we transition into a new month, for all of you tuning in, how about those Tigers and how about those Lions? I think we've all been pleasantly surprised in terms of what's going on, but hey, let's keep the momentum going. You know, this is your source for information across the great city of Detroit, state of Michigan, across the country. So we talk to business leaders from across this area in terms of what's happening, give you the latest news, the latest updates, the special guests. All my guests are special in the conference room with Mark S. Lee. And this time it's no different. You've seen him before. You've heard him on radio with me. You've seen him on TV and with me and doing past interviews. Mr. Chris Lambert, who's the president, the founder, the president of Life Remodel, doing great things across the city. Chris Lambert, good to see you. How you doing?
Mark S. Lee, my brother, it is great to be with you.
How many years do we go back? I was thinking before we started this conversation, I remember when your son came to the studio
Yep.
years ago. How many years ago?
That was like 2015. I think you and I connected in 2014. So we've been together going on a little over a decade, man.
We got a decade. We got to slow this down a little bit, man, because time is flying. But anyway, Chris is doing great things. We're going to give you an update, give him an opportunity, give us an update on Life Remodel. He just had some great news recently. He's really doing make some changes in the neighborhoods and purchasing old buildings. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Chris Lambert, and talk about, for those tuning in before we jump into it, Life Remodel, for those who may not be aware exactly what is Life Remodel.
I always like to start with why we exist. And the reason we do what we do is because we're absolutely convinced that Detroiters have all the talent they need, but many don't have access to all the opportunities they deserve. And so what we do in response to that reality is we repurpose large vacant school buildings. I'm sitting in one of them right now, into what we call one-stop hubs of opportunity for community thriving. We then fill these buildings with the best and brightest nonprofits that are providing services directly requested by the community, and we help them collaborate to really move the needle in very, very significant ways.
And how long has Life Remodel been around? For how many years?
I started the organization in 2010, and we used to build houses in 6 days.
Yeah.
We used to renovate existing high schools that are still high schools to this day, and we no longer do that. We now focus on vacant school buildings, and that has been more transformative than everything we've done combined.
And let's come back to that in a second. How many employees you've grown from what to what over that 10-year period?
I mean, we grew from none to 1 to 21 right now, and still growing. And then, Mark, you've jumped in on this with us before, but you're familiar with every year we mobilize a little over 5,000 volunteers, and we beautify a couple square miles surrounding the latest and greatest vacant school buildings that we're working on. And it just so happens we did that last week with over 5,000 volunteers. This time we're on the east side now, at the old Dominican High School, which was most recently called Winans Academy of Performing Arts, which is located on Whittier and 94, right by Grosse Pointe.
Yeah.
And it was an incredibly remarkable week. We're kicking off the renovation of that property, and it's just going well.
And that was the point I want you to make, was the level of growth, not just necessarily in terms of employees and the organization, but the number of volunteers, going upwards of 5,000 volunteers. We basically started, next to nothing years ago. And talk about the number of school properties thus far that you have renovated across how many neighborhoods and the former schools. And then we're going to unpack what happened last week as well.
Sure. So when we were renovating existing high schools, we renovated 3 of those: Cody High School, Osborne High School, Denby High School. And then we transitioned to the concept of repurposing vacant schools. And so So far, we have completed one in its entirety, and that's the Durfee Innovation Society, which has actually now produced impact far beyond what we even imagined. And we had some pretty lofty goals. And Mark, I'll just drop a couple,
Go
quick.
ahead.
So when we opened the doors to the Durfee Innovation Society in 2017, 80% of people who lived within 4.5 square miles of that building lived
Hmm.
at or below the poverty line. Last year, Gallup Research surveyed thousands of Detroit residents across the entire city, and their research concluded that our neighborhood, the Durfee neighborhood, they now call it, has the second highest perception of thriving opportunities in all of Detroit. And Chief White of DPD called us to inform us that our neighborhood has the #1 lowest crime rates in the entire city. So this model is working, and it is time to scale it over to the east side. And we're really, really excited about what's coming.
So, point of personal privilege here. I remember going to the event that you had, the prom event
Yes.
that you had a couple of years ago, last year or whenever this year, and I remember driving up to Durfee Innovation Center. I think I shared this with you. That's actually my old neighborhood, and what was so emotional for me is
Mhm.
Durfee was the elementary school I was supposed to be going to. That's how close it was to my neighborhood. And right after the rebellion back in the '60s, my family moved to Northwest Detroit. But then I went to another school in Northwest Detroit. My point is, that's how close it was to my neighborhood, and to see how that has transformed that neighborhood is remarkable to see, and it's a testament to you and your commitment to these neighborhoods. And let's talk about the Winans Academy and what your plans are for that. But before I do that, again, I know I bounced around because I got so much I want to ask you.
Yeah.
Is talk about what happened last week again. You had 5,000 volunteers. Exactly where was that and what happened that particular week? And then we'll talk about Winans Academy.
Sure. So we had 5,000 volunteers on the east side, all within 2.5 square miles of this new vacant school, the former Winans Academy that we purchased last year. And so these volunteers were out. They were clearing blight on vacant properties. So removing
Hmm.
overgrown brush and weeds, illegal dumping, and just bringing significant beauty into the community. And when you have 5,000 people working together with lawnmowers and weed whackers and loppers, and then we bring in the cat heavy machinery and the operating engineers jump in. It's amazing how much work we can get done together. And so you have volunteers from the neighborhood, corporations, over 150 companies. GM alone sent 1,000 people, and there were
Oh my goodness.
Amazon was represented big, and Masco and Taubman. In fact, Amazon, I didn't even know this till a couple years ago. They own the company Ring, right, for the Ring doorbells.
Yeah.
And I have 2 Ring doorbells, and I love them. They donated this year 100 Ring doorbells to the 100 residents that are closest to our new, Anchor Detroit project, and they installed them. And so, you just have all these people coming together doing what they do best, and it's incredible to see what can happen in 6 days.
So I can only imagine the volunteers. I know there's city folks, there's suburban folks, everybody's coming together, corporations. The excitement in their faces probably off the chart. I would guess when they first come in, they're not exactly sure what to expect. And then once they get engaged over that multi-day period, I can only imagine the enthusiasm and the excitement from their perspective.
Mark, it's one of those weeks where you have a renewed hope in humanity,
Yeah.
and that we can love one another. We can work together. And it inspires you to want to do life like that 365 days a year.
And when you think about what you just said, there are 365 days a year, and it inspires you. I've been tracking you for a long time, although we've been friends for quite a while, clearly. And just to see the impact that you're having on this city, quite frankly, beyond Detroit, beyond the city as well. But it's an inspiration if we get everybody in Detroit, across the metropolitan area, to spotlight you and what you're doing, to say what you just said. All things are possible if we come together and put our differences aside, the barriers aside, and have a common cause. In this case, it's helping to repurpose these old schools and the neighborhoods I mean, remarkable things can happen. Where did you get that vision from, Chris? Where did you get that? You're not even from Detroit, but you came here. How did how did you get that vision that inspires others?
And I'm from a town so small in northern Indiana, we didn't even have a four-way stoplight until I was in middle school. So the words urban neighborhood revitalization, those were
Yeah.
three words I never heard in succession in my upbringing. But the long story short of it is, for me, this was very much a spiritual sense of God saying, I want you to move to Detroit and I want you to invest your time, talent, and treasures into the lives of people who many have experienced a lot of disinvestment. And as a result of a lot of just tremendous historic systemic racism in our country, opportunity is not equally distributed all
Mm.
over, right? Talent is. And so I got in the business of creating access to opportunity. The reality is, man, I've learned more than I've been even able to give. Like the work that we get to do in Detroit neighborhoods, we call it life remodeled because all of us are on this lifelong journey of discovering more of who we are and why we're here. And Detroiters teach me every single day more about life than I knew before I came here. So, um, man, I'm a blessed man to be a part
You're a
of.
blessed man. You're a blessing to Detroit. And before we wrap up, I want to ask you, I'm sure you're getting requests from other cities across the country
Yep.
in terms of just studying what you're doing.
Yep.
Are you getting requests and kind
Yes.
of what's your longer term plan?
Yeah. Yeah. I've looked at vacant school buildings in Chicago, St. Louis, Indianapolis, Flint, Pontiac, Lansing. Here's what I discovered. There are great people in many of these cities who have visions that are very similar to ours. So for a while, I was thinking that Life Remodel was actually going to buy properties in those cities. And now we've completely changed our mind. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to get behind nonprofit leaders in those cities. We're actually in the process of creating a guidebook. This is the first time I've said this publicly, so you're the
All
first to
right.
hear it.
Breaking news.
That it'll be done by April, at least the written content. And we're going to make that available throughout the country to show organizations how we've done what we've done. We're going to talk a lot about our failures so that people don't have to do the same things that we did wrong. And then what we discovered that's working and what we believe is transferable. We're also going to create this boot camp experience where people are going to come to Detroit and see the two opportunity hubs that we've created, meet community leaders, meet funders, meet nonprofits that are tenants in these spaces and really moving the needle. And then we're going to create a consultancy to coach other orgs. So we actually have 9 nonprofits from cities like Dallas, Chicago, Charlotte, North Carolina, Southfield, right next door, and even Detroit that are hoping to glean from this guidebook. And I think that's going to grow to a much larger number.
And the last question before I ask you one other question real quick is your vision for the east side that you're doing right now is going to be set up similar to the Durfee Innovation Center or a
Yep.
hub, if you will, or what's your vision? What do you see
Yeah.
happening over there?
Yeah, it's going to be very similar to Durfee in that Durfee is full of nonprofits that are providing services requested by the community. And the same
Mhm.
process has happened on the east side, where we have a really clear understanding of what residents around Denby High School and around this Anchor Detroit project, which, by the way, they named Anchor Detroit. And I
Okay,
love
that's
we have
awesome.
a really good picture of what they want. And what they want is youth programs. They want workforce development initiatives that are specifically focused on tech education and tech workforce development. They
Mhm.
want health and wellness access increased, and they want to focus on arts and culture. And so one of those cool announcements that I should share with everybody is we have this beautiful auditorium that has 700 seats. Unfortunately, the roof went bad and the seats got rotten. And so
Mm.
the very seats that you sat in the Fox Theater are no longer there. They are now in our building because Fox just got all brand new seats. They gave us their very best seats, and we're currently storing them in our building and about to install them. And so this theater is going to be the premier performing arts space outside of downtown. We're not going to
Sure,
with the
sure.
historic Fox. That's the best of the best, right? But this is going to be second best. And so you're going to have arts and culture combined with all these other programs. And again, this was the design of the community. So it's going to be a very unique and impressive space. We're even adding on a new addition of 26,000 square feet to this property. So it's going to be something else.
What's the timeline with it?
We'll have the phase 1 where the existing building will be done by July of next year. And we're $2.7 million away from fundraising for that. So, Mark, maybe you can help us with a matching gift of
I'll give you a
1.35
matching gift.
million.
Yeah, maybe I'll make it 10 million. 10 million, you
And
got it.
Phil,
And
boom.
speaking of which, so that people can donate and volunteer, give them the website where they can certainly get more information.
Liferemodeled.org, LIFEREMODELED.org. No, but I mean, and seriously, I'm not asking anybody for millions of dollars unless you got it. But we do have an opportunity for anybody who wants to volunteer, whether it's reading with a child, whether it's doing blight removal, or maybe getting involved with one of our other nonprofit partners. We'd love to help you just help Detroit and whatever that looks like, whatever your passions are. If there's an intersection, hit us up and we'll see what we can do.
This man is the real deal. I want to thank Chris Lambert for all that you're doing for Detroit, what you're doing for the neighborhoods, and how you're giving back to all folks across, not just the city, the metropolitan area. You are truly a blessing to Detroit, man. I appreciate you, and thank you for joining me in the conference room. In 15 seconds or less, anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, I want to say it goes both ways, brother. You're an incredible blessing to our city and our region, and I'm honored to be your friend. And thanks for creating the time to be together.
And on that note, I want to thank you all for tuning in to this week's edition of In the Conference Room with Mark S. Lee. Go make it a great day, make it a great week, and we will check you out next time on In the Conference Room. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Because I live in Detroit, I was able to get tuition-free college through the Detroit Promise. I feel very fortunate working with the Detroit Promise. They were able to afford me so many opportunities. I'm currently studying media production and journalism at University of Michigan Dearborn. I'm looking to take my talents further into the production industry, short films. I love working with people here, and this is where I want to be. And that's why I'm Detroit for life.
Detroit.